Hello. So I'm continuing my videos on games that I own, but I have only played once, and as you can see, next up is Roll for the Galaxy. I got this game, I think, from my BG Board Game Geek Secret Santa in December of 2016, I believe. I show that the one time I played it was February of 2017. And I do remember playing it, but I I don't remember again uh, very much about how it played. So I'm gonna play it again, and then I'll tell y'all how to set it up, how to play. I'll show a few example turns and give you a little bit of what I think about it. Anyway, let's get started. Alright, first thing you do in setup is take your bag of tiles here and put them in the center of the play area, along with all your dice. Then you'll take a number of victory point chips depending on the number of players. I'm going to play 3 players, so it's 36 chips. So these are worth 5 and these are 1s. And then you take all the 10-point victory point chips and just set them to the side. They can be grabbed in the final round. Alright, then each player will get a dice cup. I guess it kind of looks like the bottom of a rocket ship. Each player will get a credit marker. Kind of looks like a man, but I guess it's a credit. Maybe it's a dollar sign looking thing. Anyway, you get a credit marker and one of these mats, and you'll put the credit marker on the one space of the credit track there. Each player will get one of these player screens that you put behind your mat, and each player will get a phase strip, and that goes behind your screen. Then each player will get a faction tile and a homeworld tile chosen randomly. I think there's 9 of each. You can tell them separate from the other tiles because they have these dark gray borders. So each player will randomly get 1 faction tile and 1 homeworld tile. And that will go in front of your mat. So your play area will look like this. You'll have your faction tile, homeworld tile, your mat with your credit marker, your screen, and your phase strip. Alright, then next each player will draw 2 tiles from the bag. And you'll put 1 on your development section of your mat and 1 on your world section on your mat. And it says for your first game, put the lowest numbered development and lowest numbered world face up. In games thereafter you can choose. So this is a 4-point world, this is a 3-point world, and a 3-point development. So we put the 3-point world face up there and the 2-point development face up here in the construction zone of your player mat. Alright, then each player takes 3 home white dice and puts them in their cup. Each player takes 2 more home dice and puts them in their citizenry here on their player mat. And each player will look at their faction mat and their home world and see if it grants them any starting dice. So this one, gain a green die into your citizenry at the start of the game. So I'll grab a green die that goes in my citizenry, that's this section. And gain a red military die into your cup at the start of the game. And that's the only time you'll gain these die from your home faction and home world tiles. One more important piece I forgot. In the center of the board you'll put these phase tiles in order with the X side up. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, one thing I don't think I mentioned when I was saying that you draw these tiles and put the lowest development in the lowest world. You can tell the development side. Well, these tiles are all double-sided. One side has a development. You can tell that by the diamond. And one side has a world. That side you can tell by the circle. So again, for your first game, it says the two tiles you draw, put the lowest development face up in the development construction section, and the lowest world face up in the world section. And of course, in your later games, you can choose which side to put face up. But I just wanted to mention which side was development, which side was world. But I've got the game all set up for 3 players now. So let's go with how you play. Alright, the game is played in rounds. They're all done simultaneously according to the rules. Now, my suggestion, if you're playing with all new players, that I would not do them all simultaneously. I would take turns just so you can make sure everybody's doing the right thing. Make sure everybody has the rules down, and then maybe in games thereafter you can do the you can do each one of the steps in the round simultaneously like the rules say. But the rules do say, in case there's a time when turn order may matter, you should do it in this order. Each of these home factions has a small number up at the top, so that's 9, 5, and 3. And the rules state if you have to do something in order, you go clockwise from the lowest numbered player faction. So in this game, you would start with the red, and then come over here to blue and green. But again, the rules stipulate each step in the rounds you're going to do simultaneously. Again, unless you don't want to. So the 5 steps are roll, assign, reveal, do the phases, and then manage the empire. So let's talk about each one of those steps in a round. So the first step in a round is roll, and that's obvious. You'll shake up the dice you have in your cup and roll them. So let's do that for each of our players. Well, actually, I guess I don't need to do that for each of the players now because I'm explaining the rules, not doing a sample turn. Alright, so the first thing you do is roll the dice you have in your cup. And you're supposed to do that secretly behind your screen so the other players don't see what you rolled. And by the way, these screens do have like a player aid on them. This has the round summary. This has what you can do in the phases. Anyway, a lot of helpful information here on the screens besides just hiding your dice. Lord, my daughter's birds are loud. Anyway, ignore that. Alright, so after you roll, the next thing you do is assign. So first you match the face of each die you roll up to a phase on the phase strip. So you have explore, develop, settle, produce, and ship. So the first thing you do is align your dice with the phases. Now the next thing you'll do is take one of your dice and put it on top of one of the phases that you want to occur this round. And it doesn't have to be one that matches the phase. So if I wanted settle to occur this round, I could take this ship dice and put it on top of settle, and then that will count as a settle dice. So again, one of the ones you choose does not have to match the phase that you want. But you do choose one. Now let's talk about what each of these phases are, so you have an idea of what you want to choose. Alright, if you choose the explore phase, then that lets you draw more tiles from the bag to put in your construction zone. And the construction zone, you start out with these 2 tiles, and these are what you will be using to put more tiles, more worlds and developments into your tableau. So in the Explorer, you can choose to draw a tile from the bag, and you can also abandon tiles from your construction queue here, and for each tile you abandon from your construction queue, you can draw an additional tile from the bag. So if I chose, if I selected Phase Explore, maybe with this one, um, with this die, I would get to draw one tile from the bag. If I wanted to say I don't like this world, so I'm going to abandon it. When you abandon it, you put it under the Explore tile, and then I could draw an additional tile, and then I place those on my construction zone. At the end of the Explore phase, once all players have explored, if they're going to, then any abandoned tiles would go back in the bag. And with the dice I used to explore, that would go into my citizenry. Let me go ahead and just move this out of the way. That would go into my citizenry. And then, as you can see, I still have another tile underneath the Explore column, so I could do that again, or would do that again with this dice. It would go in my citizenry, and then I could draw another tile. I could abandon, again, I could abandon tiles from my construction queue. Any new tile you get goes under the top tile. So you can end up having several in a stack. You can abandon any of those from in the stack again to draw an extra tile. So if you abandon 2 tiles plus the dice you use, you could draw 3 tiles from the bag and put them either in the development or the world side of your construction queue, however you like. And that is the scout action of Explore. There you have 2 options if you explore. You can scout, where you draw tiles, or you can just put the dice in your citizenry and move your credit marker up 2 spaces on the credit track there, instead of drawing tiles. Alright, the next possible phase is develop. If I had chose develop, when you choose the develop phase, you take any dice that are on your develop selection, and if you had rolled some develops and had some below, you would take those dice and put them on top of your development. So in this case, if I put these 2 dice on this development, remember they're the ones with the diamond, it requires 2 dice to complete it. I've now got 2 dice on there. The 2 dice I put on there would go in the citizenry, and this one would now go into my tableau, and I would have constructed that. And usually these developments have some kind of power that you can do in a phase. But anyway, that goes into your tableau. Now, if you still had, say I had 3 dice under developed and it only required 2, because I don't have another development there, any remaining dice I had here in my development column would go back into my cup. If I had another development underneath of this one, then they could go on top of that. Even if you don't have enough to complete the next development, they would just sit on top of that and stay there until a future round when you do have enough. If I had another development here and I still had enough dice under my development column to add to that after I completed that one, then I could complete another development. Alright, the next possible phase, if you selected settle, it works just like development, only you're doing it on the world. You would put any dice you had under your settle column on top of your world. If you put enough dice on there, in this case 3, to settle this world, then it goes into your tableau. The dice you used to settle go into your citizenry, and then the worlds usually have a one-time power that usually give you dice in some way. So this one says gain a novelty, that's the blue dice, cyan, a novelty good on this world when you place it. So if you built that world with settle, then you get to put a blue dice on it like that. And again, it works just like development. If you settle a world and there you have another one underneath in your construction queue and you still have more dice under your settle column, you can put those on top of it. Even if it's not enough to complete it, they'll just stay on there, you know, through the rounds until you put enough dice on there to complete. So anyway, that's settle. So next is produce. So if you select produce for your action for the round. So if I selected produce here, I would have 2 in my produce column. Those become goods on your non-gray world. So I could put, but in your tableau, not in your construction queue. So I could put this one on this yellow world, and that becomes a good on there. Even though I have another produce good here, I could not put it on a gray world. It has to be a non-gray world. So this die, which I had extra, since a world can only hold 1 good, unless you have there's I think a development that allows you to have more than 1 good on a world. But normally you can only have 1 good on a world. So at this point I don't have another good I could, another world I could put this good on, so it would just go back in my cup. And finally, the last phase you can select is ship. And if you select that, then you have 2 options. You can trade or consume. If you choose to trade, then any good you have on a world, so you know, if I had a good here on this yellow world, you get a number of credits for that good. So you have to take, so if I chose ship and I decided to trade with this ship dice, I take the dice that I used for ship and the good off the world, and then according to the world's color you can look at this table and you see how many credits you get. So for a yellow good you would get 6 credits. So I would move my credit marker up 6, so that would put me at 7. Now if I had another dice down here in my ship column and I had another good on a different world, then I could trade that one also, taking that dice and the good off the world, putting them in my citizenry and gaining the amount of credits. But the most credits you can get is 10. Now the other option you have when you do a ship action, instead of a trade, you can consume, and that's how you get victory points. So if I decide, if I had a good on this world and I used a die from I chose the ship action, and I take that ship dice and the good off of the world and put them in the citizenry, and I choose to consume it, well then you get victory points. You get 1 victory point for taking a good off of the world. If the good on the world was the same color as the world, then you'd get an additional victory point. So let's just take an example. If I had a yellow good on this world and I chose to consume there, I would take, you know, my ship die, consume that yellow dice. I would get 1 point, victory point automatically, and an additional victory point because the dice I took off of the world matched the color of the world, so that would give me 2 victory points. You can actually get a 3rd victory point if the dice you're using to ship, so if I had a yellow dice here, well, it doesn't actually have a ship, but I could have chosen it, you know, for my shipping action. So if I chose this dice to ship and shipped off this yellow world, since they're both yellow, I get the automatic 1 victory point, a victory point for the good matching the world, and an additional victory point for the good I'm shipping with matching the world. So that would be 3 victory points, and you just take them from the victory point pile over here and put them in your play area. Now there's these purple dice. Those, when you're doing consume, those automatically match the home. They're like a wild color for consume. So if I had a purple dice on here and I used a ship to consume that purple dice, it's considered to match the color of the world that I take it off of. And also, if you're using a purple dice to actually do the shipping, it's considered to match the world also. So if you use 2 purple dice, you would get 3 points for that also. Alright, so that kind of explains all the phases. So let's back to we've rolled the dice behind our screen. We're choosing one, or again, you line up the dice to match the phases. Then you choose one to choose the action you want to happen this round. Now each player will be doing this, so they may choose a different phase than you, and so that phase may occur. Any phases that are not chosen by a player will not happen during the round. So, again, let's just say this guy, oops, these screens. All right, so we'll just say he wants to settle. So, even though this was a ship dice, the dice you choose to select a phase can have any face, and it will then be counted as that symbol that on the phase you put it on. And if you had additional dice there, of course, they'll be used during the phase. So all players will, assign their dice according to the column. Then they'll all select a phase they want to occur. Now, everybody has this starting power of dictate, where you can take one of your workers and put it here next to your phase strip, and it allows you to move one of your dice from one column to another and treat it as that face of dice. So this is all done again while you still have the screen up and nobody's looking. So if I wanted to have another settled dice and I didn't need this produce, I could use the dictate power. I put that dice over there, and that allows me to move one dice from any column to another column, and then it gets to count as if it matched that face. So here in this case, if I decided to dictate, I would actually have 2 dice that I'm going to use for settle action, even though neither one of the face actually matched settle when I rolled them. Alright, the next step is the reveal step. So everybody will remove their screens and reveal what they've rolled and how they've assigned them. Then any dice you used to do a dictate power, that just automatically goes back in your cup. Again, all players will reveal, and then you'll see what actions, what phases were chosen by the different players. So, this player chose settle, so you would flip over the settle phase so that that's going to occur. If this player had chose explore, you would flip that over. And if this player, we'll say this player had chose ship. So the only phases that would occur are explore, settle, and ship. Any players that had dice in columns on develop and produce, they would just put those dice back in their cup because they would not be used this round. So then each player would that had, starting with the first phase, explore, any player that had dice in the explore column would be able to do the explore action. As I explained, they could scout to get new tiles, or use the dice for stock instead to move up on the credits. So any player that had dice in explore would do that. Again, develop wouldn't occur in this phase. Those dice would have been put back in the cup. Anybody, then you'd move on to settle because it's the next phase. So all players who had dice in the settle would be able to put their dice on their worlds, or put worlds in their tableau, depending on what they do. Again, all players do this simultaneously. Then, of course, produce would not happen. And then finally, any player that had dice in the ship would do the ship action. They could either trade or consume if they had dice on planets to do so. Again, any dice you can't use, say you had, 3 dice under ship, but you only had one uh, good that you could trade or consume. Any dice you can't use go back in your cup. Any dice you did use to do any action go into your citizenry. So once all the 5 phases have been done, then you move on to the manage empire step. And that's how you get dice back in your cup, because as you're doing these phases and spending dice, they're going into your citizenry, which gives you less dice to roll every round. So when the first step in the manage empire phase is recruit. So at that point, for every credit you have, so if I had 3 credits, maybe because I had done the stock action and explore, which gave me 2. Remember, you start with 1. So if I have 3 credits, I could spend 1, 2, 3, and I could choose 3 dice out of my citizenry and put them back in my cup. If I only had 1 credit, I spend 1 credit and I can only choose 1 dice from my citizenry and put it back in my cup. And once you've gone down to 0, you always move back to 1. So during the next round, you'll always have at least 1 credit to spend to get 1 dice back. Then after you've recruited, using your credits to get dice back, you have the option to recall any dice that you've put on your construction queue, for develop or on your world. You can, if you want, recall those dice, take them off of those planets or developments in your construction queue and put them back in your cup. And if you have dice on worlds that are, goods on a world, you can also recall those during this step and put them back in your cup if you'd rather not wait till a future turn to consume or trade those goods. Finally, the last step in the manage empire is flip the tiles back over to the phase tiles back over to the X side, and then you'll check for end of game. So there's 2 things that trigger the end of game. Remember I said at the start of the game you have 36 victory points for 3 players. Again, it depends on the number of players. But in 3-player game you have 36. If ever the last victory point is taken during a round, then that's going to be the final round of the game. Now, if somebody, takes the last victory point and another player, during that round would require more victory points for whatever action they've done, a trade action or something, or a consume action, then they can use what these 10-point victory point tokens at that point. But, that's only during the final round, because as soon as the round where the final victory point of the original amount, again 36 in this, is taken, then that's going to be the final round. The other thing that can trigger the final round is when you get 12 tiles in your tableau. So you start with 3, this counts as 2, and your home world is 3. So when somebody's built 9 or more tiles into their tableau, developments or worlds, in a round where somebody's built 12 or more tiles into their tableau, then that's the final round. So once the final shipping phase and manage empire step takes place, once one of those triggers has happened, then that's that triggers the game end, and then you add up your victory points, which is victory points you accumulated of this type, and then every tile in your tableau, you add up their points. That's 3, 6, and again, and of course this is 0, but you add up the points from the tiles you have in your tableau, add that to the victory points you've accumulated from doing the consume actions. Some tiles may give you additional victory points that you've built into your tableau, and whoever has the highest score will win Roll for the Galaxy. That's kind of a quick rules explanation. And again, there's other things that will come into play because a lot of these developments that you build will give special powers, like this one here. Once you've built this and it's in your tableau, anytime a ship action occurs, you get 1 extra credit for each good you trade during that ship phase. And again, different developments have different powers. This one here, this one just happens to also occur during the ship phase, but you get $2 for each good you trade this turn from a blue world. So as the game goes on and you get more of these players, get more of these developments out, there's more special powers that come into play. For instance, this from this starting faction has a power that happens during the produce phase. So it can add quite a bit to the game. You got to remember what your powers are. So I don't know, that may seem confusing with that quick rules explanation. So let's do a couple of turns. Alright, so we'll do some example turns now. Again, I'm not going to use these screens because I'm playing solo, so it really doesn't matter. But if you were playing with other players, which you should, because this game is not really meant to be played solo, you would, when you're doing the roll and the assigned dice portion, you would do that all behind the screen, and then once everybody's done that, then everybody will reveal the dice that they've rolled and assigned. But and you can see that again on the round summary: roll, assign, reveal. But I'm not going to use these screens because it's not necessary for me. So I'll roll for each player. Remember, this all happens simultaneously if you're playing with not playing solo. And then again, each player will align the dice that they've got. I don't think I went over this in a rules explanation, but a asterisk symbol there is wild. You can put that under any column that you want. So let's just say I'm going to put that under the develop, and then this guy got to produce and a ship. And alright, now each player has to decide what action they want to occur for sure this round. You may speculate, well, I think this guy's probably going to do explore. Even though I want to do that, I also want to do something else. So I'm hoping he's going to choose that, and I'm going to choose develop or whatever. So you just kind of have to kind of guess what you think the other players are gonna do and what you're gonna do. But we'll say this guy, he for sure wants a settle to occur, so he's gonna choose settle. Again, I could have used my explore die to choose settle if I wanted to, and then I would have 3 dice in the settle phase. But I'm gonna stick with that. Okay, this guy, since he's got 2 development, he probably wants development to occur. He doesn't care anything about shipping occurring because he's not got no goods on planets. So he's going to use this ship dice to choose develop, just to make sure that occurs. And we'll say this guy wants to... he does have a good, so he may want shipping to occur, and we'll do that just so we see how that works. So he's going to choose ship. Now remember, players do have this dictate where they could use 1 dice to move a dice. Now this guy doesn't want to do that, and you have to do you have to select your phase first before you can use the dictate. And again, this is all occurring behind the screen if you're playing with multiple players. He doesn't want to use the dictate power, but this guy might want to. Well, no, he's only got 1 good to ship, so let's just see what happens. So now everybody says they're ready, so now everybody would lift their screens and reveal. So you say, okay, well this guy chose settle, so we got to flip settle over. This guy chose develop, so we've got to flip develop over. And this guy chose ship, so we have to flip over the ship phase. Nobody chose explore, so explore's not going to happen, so he puts his explore dice back in the cup. He doesn't have an explore dice. He does, so it goes back in his cup. And nobody chose produce, so even though this guy's got to produce, that's not going to happen, so he puts it back in his cup. The other phases are going to happen. And so again, now we start taking actions in phase order. So the first phase is not going to occur, so then we start with develop. Well, he didn't do a develop action. This player did do a develop action, so he's got one development that only costs 2. He's got 3 here, so he's going to take these 2, put them on this development. That's all he needs to develop it, so they go into his citizenry, and now he puts this in his tableau. He still has 1 dice left to develop with, but he doesn't have another development under here to put that on, so that just goes back in his cup. This guy did do development. He has 1 dice there, so he puts it on his development. Now that's not enough to develop it, so that dice will just stay there. And then we go on to the settle phase. Well, this player did settle. He's got 2 dice. He'll put them on that world. He doesn't have enough. He needs 3 to actually settle it, so those dice will just stay on there. This guy also did a settle, so he'll take that dice, put it on his world. And he did not do a settle, so then the final phase is going to be there's no produce, so then we go to shipping. He didn't do a shipping. He didn't do a shipping, but he did do a shipping because he has a good on a planet. So now he has to decide if he wants to trade or consume that. Well, I think he wants to consume because the good matches the world, so that'll give him an extra victory point. So he says he's going to consume. This one doesn't match the world color, so he doesn't get the bonus victory point for that. But so he'll ship, he'll consume, so he puts both those in his citizenry, and since the good matches the color of the world, he gets the 1 bonus victory point. So he gets 2 victory points out of the pile. So those just go into his play area. He's got 2 victory points, and that's all he can do. So that's all 5 phases. That ends the phases section. Now we go on to the manage empire. So the first thing we do is recruit. Well, he's got 1 credit, so he spends it. Again, that goes back to 1. So he can only get 1 dice out of his citizenry. So we'll say he's going to take his purple. Now he's only got 2 dice in his cup. This guy's going to kind of be in a similar boat. He's got 1 credit. He spends it. He'll grab his green out of his citizenry. He's only got 2 dice in his cup, and of course this goes back to 1. You'll always have 1 every round. And finally the same with this guy. He's just got 1 credit to spend. He'll take his brown good, put it back in his cup. And that leaves him with 3 dice in his cup. And again, this goes back to 1. Okay, the next thing you can do is recall. So I could, if I wanted to, if I thought, well, crap, I've only got 2 dice in my cup. That's not going to be very good. I could take these dice off of this world and put them back in my cup, but I don't want to do that because I want to settle that world. So I'm going to leave those there. I'm not going to recall anything. This guy, again, he could recall this dice off of this world, put it back in his cup, but he's not going to do it. So nobody's going to recall anything. Now we reset by flipping these tiles back over. And then we would check for game end. if the last victory point token was taken, that would trigger the game end, or if somebody had 12 tiles in their tableau, but the most anybody has is right here, 4. So it's not game end, so we start a new round. So you would, take your screen back in front of you, and everybody would roll their dice. And again, these guys would have screens also. Alright. Then you would assign your dice underneath whatever you rolled. guy got to develop and settle. Now everybody would select, a phase they want to occur. And this guy wants to add a dice onto that world so he can add it. Remember, in the dice you use to select can be any dice. It doesn't have to be. So he wants settle to occur, so he's going to take the ship dice and he's going to choose settle. This guy, he wants to get more credit so he can get more dice next time, so he's going to go ahead and just choose explore with that green dice that he has. And finally this guy, he needs 4 dice to develop this world, so he wants develop to happen. So he's going to go ahead and just take his development dice and put it on develop. So then if anybody wanted to use their dictate power, well, this guy doesn't have enough dice to do his dictate power. This guy doesn't have enough dice. Now this guy could, so I'm going to do it just to show it. So a dictate, I can put this dice here and then reassign any dice I've got here to another column. So I'm going to reassign this Explorer face over here into my dictate. So that gives me 2 dice under dictate. Okay, everybody says they're ready, so you reveal. And we say, okay, this guy chose settle, so we know settle's going to happen. This guy chose explore, so we know explore's going to happen. And this guy chose develop, so we know develop's going to happen. So we know produce and ship are not going to happen. So if anybody had dice under produce or ship, they would just go back in their cup. Now this guy that used his dictate power, this dice he used to do the dictate power, that just goes back in his cup. Now we do the phases in order. So starting with explore phase, this guy doesn't have a dice under explore. This guy does. So now he has the choice where he could do the scout, where he could draw tiles from the bag, or he can do the stock, which is what he's going to do. So he's going to spend this to move up 2 credits on that credit track. And this guy did not do explore. So we move on to the next phase. Alright, next phase is develop. This guy does have a dice under the develop column, so he's going to put it on there. It's not enough to fully develop that, but he's going to put it on there. This player did not do develop, and this guy did do develop. He's got 2 dice there. He's going to put them both on there. He still needs 1 more to complete it, but he's getting close. But as you can see, that locks up a lot of his dice. Anyway, so that's the end of the develop. So finally we go to the settle phase. This guy does have 1 on settle, so he's going to use that. That's 3. That's enough to settle that. So these dice will go into his citizenry, and he'll move this in here, and he gets to gain a novelty good on this world. So gain a novelty good on this world when you place it. So he gets to place a blue novelty dice on there from the dice stock. This guy also did a settle. So he's going to take that and put it on this world. It's not enough to complete it. He needs 1 more. And this guy did not do a settle. So these 2 phases don't occur, so that's the end of the phases. Now we go to the manage empire, so we recruit. He just has 1, so he gets to get 1 dice. Now he'll take his purple. So he's only going to have 1 dice to roll this next round. Now this guy got 3 because he did that explore and did the stock power, so he gets 1, 2, 3, and it just goes back. But he gets to grab 3 dice and put them back in his cup. And this guy just gets 1 to go back in his cup. So he'll have 2 dice. This guy's going to have 3 dice, and this guy's going to have just 1 measly dice for his next round. So then we have recall. He could recall that dice and that dice, and or that either one of those dice to his cup if he wanted, since he's only got 1. But he doesn't want to do that yet. He wants to go ahead and settle that, and he wants to be able to ship that good, or consume it or trade it. This guy could recall those 2, but he's not going to, and he's close to doing that. He's not going to recall either, so nobody's going to recall. Finally, you check for, or we reset, flip these back over, And then we check for game end, which we know we're not there. We'll do one more turn. Okay, everybody would put their screens back. You know, everybody would roll. Alright, well, he just got a ship. This guy got a produce, an explore, and a settle. And this guy got 2 explorers. Okay, now everybody's got to select what they want to do. Well, he could ship and you know, get that good, but you know, ship, trade, or consume that good. Might be a good idea for him to get these dice, so that's what he's going to do. He's going to go ahead and select ship, so we can show a trade. I think we showed a consume already. Alright, this guy, well, he wants to settle again. He wants to finish off that world. I would like to show a produce. Yeah, I'll just because I want to show a produce, we'll say he's going to do produce. And this guy, he wants to develop, so he's going to go ahead and choose develop for his action. Nobody... he could do his dictate. Well, actually, this guy is not going to produce because he doesn't have a world. Oh, yeah, he does have a world he can produce on. So, actually, he probably wants to use, he's going to use this to produce. And then he's going to do a dictate power and move this to settle. Alright, everybody's selected and done. They're going to reveal. Alright, so we know we're doing a ship action, so we flip that over. We know this guy chose a produce action, so we know we're going to do that. We flip that over. And this guy chose a develop, so we know we're going to develop. We flip that over. So any dice under explore, like this one, they're just going to go back in the cup. We're not doing settle, so any dice under settle, so like this one, just going to go back in his cup. And of course the dice this guy used for dictate goes back in his cup. Alright, so we'll do the phases in order. First phase is not occurring, the next phase is develop. He's not doing develop, he's not doing develop. This guy is doing develop. So he puts his 4th dice on there. Then now I'll go, that's 4, that's what he needed. So those all go into his citizenry. And this goes into his tableau. Okay, settle is not occurring. Produce is recurring. As occurring, he didn't do a produce. This guy did do a produce, so he takes that good. And he has a green world he can produce on, so he'll put that die there. And he is out of dice, so he's not doing any other phases. He's out. So finally we get to ship. So this guy's going to do a ship action. So for his shipping action, he's going to do, instead of a consume, just so I can show it, he's going to do a trade. So it takes his shipping dice and the good he's going to trade, both going to the citizenry. Blue dice is only worth 3 credits, so 1, 2, 3, so that puts him up to 4. And that's going to end the phases, so finally we go to the manage empire, we recruit, so he has 4 credits he can spend, so he's going to take 1, 2, 3, 4 dice into his cup, and then of course this goes back to here. This guy just has 1 credit he can spend, so he gets 1 dice into his cup. And this guy just has 1 credit he can spend, so he'll just put 1 dice into his cup. Again, we could do recall, so he could recall those 2 or that one off his world or both, but nobody's going to recall. We reset. And then, again, check for end of game, which we're not at. But I think I pretty much showed an example of most types of actions you can do. We didn't do an explore where we drew tiles, but I guess I can show just like if we had. So if somebody had done an explore action, you know, they would draw. If they just had 1 dice there, they would just draw 1 tile unless he wanted to abandon one of the tiles here, and then he could draw another one, but we'll just say he's just going to draw one, so he would put that in his citizenry, draw a tile, and now he could decide whether he wants to put this in his world construction zone, which that's a pretty high one. That would lock up a lot of or he could put this in his development, and it would go underneath his current development. So that's kind of, if you're not, when you do explore, if you don't do the stock to get credits, you know, you can get more tiles in your construction zone. So that's it. That's hopefully you get a pretty good idea of how the game plays. I think it's fun. I mean, again, it's not, even just playing it solo, I think it's fun, even though it's not really meant to be played solo, because you're really not supposed to know what phases the other players are going to choose, and you kind of got to guess, like I talked about earlier. Well, I think he's going to choose this, so I'm not going to choose that because I want to do this, but I also want to do that, so hopefully he chooses it. Anyway, I think it's a fun game. I don't, again, most of the times I say this, I don't know why I haven't played this, other than, you know, I don't get together with my game group, but, you know, I don't know, 3 or 4, maybe 3, 4 at the most, maximum times a year. Again, I could play with my wife and daughter, but they don't love board games as much as I do. But I don't know, maybe this is one they might enjoy, so I might suggest it to them this week and see if I can get them to play. But as far as comparison to Race for the Galaxy, I do own Race for the Galaxy, and I used to play it, I don't know if I'd say quite a bit, but I played it several times with my son, and we did play Race for the Galaxy in a game group of 4 people one time. And I don't know, I can't say which one I like better. I think maybe this one's a little quicker, maybe a little easier. I don't know. It's been a long time since I played Race for the Galaxy, so I can't really make a good comparison. But I will say I think this game was fun, and thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it.